This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, Chelek Tesvav, book 15, the Sicha of Noach, the second Sicha. Says the Rabbi, just get it here 1 second. In connection to the pasuk that it says regarding the flood of Noach, that in the 600th year to the life of Noach, the Nivku kol mayonos tahim rabba, all of the well springs from very deep opened up, ba'arubeis hashamayim niftochu, and the windows of heaven opened. In other words, the waters came from below and from above. So it says regarding this pasuk in the Zohar that in the 600th year to the 6,000th year, he's going to open the gates of wisdom from above and the well springs of wisdom from below, and will start to prepare the world for its ascent in the 7,000th year. You know that the world is created in, it says that the Yemesh Nesenuhem, Elef Shonim be'enecha ki yames mokiyave, that 1,000 years by Hashem is like one day. So the 7,000th year represents the coming of Mashiach, the day of Shabbos. So in the 600th year of the 6,000th millennia, so that's when it's going to be the opening of the wisdom from above and the well springs of wisdom from below, and the world will become prepared to go into the 7,000th year. The explanation of these two things, says the Rebbe, the gates of wisdom above and the well springs of wisdom from below, which are alluded to in the pasuk that says that by the flood, the well springs from below were opened and the gates of heaven were open. So what does that refer to? The gates from above, the wisdom from Le'ela, from above, means the wisdom of Torah. And the wisdom from below refers to the wisdom of the nations of the world. And we see that in that time, the 6,000th year of the 600th year of the 6,000 millennia, there was a great revelation within the wisdom of Torah, especially Pnimius HaTorah, the inner aspect of Torah. I said especially. The Rebbe just says, sorry, I mistranslated that. There was a special revelation, a great revelation in the wisdom of Torah, of Pnimius HaTorah. And the Rabbi continues, as is well known, what the Tzemach Tzedek says, that there was a ketz, there was a time which was predicted as a time when Mashiach will come, and that was in the year Tafresh Ches, 5608, which is, to translate it to the Gregorian calendar, the year 1847 was predicted the Mashiach will come, and that was the year when the Likutei Torah was printed. Right? Because the what's going to be the coming of Mashiach, the advantage and the achievement and the great gift when Mashiach comes is that then there'll be the filling Mola Haaretz Deus Hashem. The world will be filled of the knowledge of Hashem. So printing of the Likutei Torah wasn't the coming of Mashiach, but it was a stage in the coming of Mashiach because it was an outpouring. It was filling the world with the knowledge of Hashem, which Likutei Torah is full of. And with several years earlier, the Alter Rebbe's Maimarim in the book Torah Or were printed, and that is in the year Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin, which is year 5,597, which in our calendar, in the Gregorian calendar is 1836. So two parts really of one book, as explained in Hayom Yom. So you had, in those years, you had a great outpouring of wisdom. That is already after the 600th year of the 6,000th millennia. So let's figure out when is the 600th year. We'll do it in 1 second. And we know that the way of learning the Pnimius HaTorah, the inner track of Torah, in the way the Alter Rebbe explained it in the books that were printed in those aforementioned years in the 1800s, represents that what the Zohar says, the Mashiach will come when the inner aspects, when the Zohar is learned in a way of Yisparnasun, in a way that it actually provide sustenance to the person in his mind. So it's understood in a greater way by the mortal mind, which that is what Hasidus Chabad does, brings down the concepts of the inner aspects of Torah, which in the Zohar and works of Kabbalah are more esoteric, and brings it down in a way that it's understood in the mortal mind. And this also represents the outpouring, the afutsu, the spreading forth of the well springs of the Baal Shem Tov, which the Mashiach said that the famous letter where the Baal Shem Tov describes he went up to the Heichal HaMashiach, to the sanctuary of Mashiach, and asked him when you were coming. He said, when your well springs are spread forth. And when was the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov? His revelation was around the year Tov Kuf. Okay, so Tov Kuf is 5,500 years from creation. That's when the beginning of the 600th year starts, right? It goes in hundreds. The beginning of the 600th century begins right after year 500. So 5,500. We go into the 600th year, the 6th century of the 6,000th year. Tov Kuf, the approximate time of the Baal Shem Tov's revelation, comes out to 1739. Okay, that would be 5,500. We're now 5782. So you minus 282 from where we are now, 2021, you get to 1739. Okay, so basically, and the Rebbe sends to the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, and he says, and interesting, the Ohr HaChaim on the Parsha of Tzav says, kind of bemoans how long we've been in Golus, and he says it's already 1,672 years, Elef Tov Reish Ayin Beis years since we're in this Golus. When was it? Since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash took place in the year 69. Add 1672 years to that the Ohr HaChaim is saying, bemoaning the fact that we're already in Golus and it's time for Mashiach to come. Comes out to the year 1741, which is Tov Kuf Beis. In other words, 2 years exactly after. This is exactly the time of the beginning of the 600th year, of the 6,000th year. So we see that in the spiritual side of things, the preparation for the coming of Mashiach begins, as the Zohar says, by the opening of the well springs from above. You have the Baal Shem Tov, and you have later within a little bit more than a century later, you have the teachings of the Alter Rebbe that are printed. I said a little bit more than a century later. You have the printings of Torah Ohr, which was in 1836, is actually a few years before the end of the 600th year. So you see the opening of the well springs from above. Hope I didn't confuse you by bringing in all the dates. Just wanted to give context. Especially I wanted to give context because the next paragraph that Rebbe says is that there's also the well springs from below. That's also when there was a great development in the wisdom of the world. So perhaps for many, when we say that the 600th century that the Zohar is talking about, it starts from 1739. So many will identify with the great expansion from 1739 onward, and within that next 100 years were some of the greatest inventions, what is called the Industrial Revolution. I just did a Google search and asked for inventions between those years, and you come up with telegraph, you come up with lighting, and you come up with machines, and you come fantastic and amazing things that started to develop and accelerated with time. But those major inventions and discoveries were taking place in the same years that from above the well springs and discoveries of deeper godly revelation was taking place in the wisdom, through the wisdom of Pnimiyus HaTorah of Chassidus. So we have to understand, sensitive. All is when we talk about the fact that the revelation of Pnimiyus HaTorah is a preparation for the ascent of the world in the 7,000th year. That's understood. The coming of Mashiach, the days of Mashiach, are described as days when Mola Haaretz Deus Hashem, the world will be full of the knowledge of Hashem, Kamayim Layom Mechasim, just as the seabed is full with water of the sea. So that's how the world will be full of the knowledge of God. So that makes sense that as a preparation for that, there should be the revelation of the inner Pnimiyus HaTorah, of the inner workings of the Torah. That's already a me'ain. It's something similar. It's partially the Torah of Mashiach. But what connection does the revelation and the great discoveries in the fields of the knowledge in worldly things have to do with the ascent of the world in the time of the coming of Mashiach in the 7,000th year? More than that, the Zohar brings them together. From the fact that the Zohar being the openings of the heavenly spheres, the openings of the of wisdom from below, from the fact that the Zohar describes them together, we understand that they are intrinsically bound together with each other. In other words, that because there's the outpouring, the new revelation of the wisdom of Torah as a preparation to Mashiach, that causes somehow the development of the wisdom of the world. So we have to understand what's the connection between them. Since obviously the knowledge that is being revealed in worldly matters is so, without an erech, is just vastly lower. It's called letata, it's called the lower wisdom. And so vastly removed from the wisdom of Torah, which is called la'ela, supernal wisdom. Especially when we talk about the pnimiyus Torah, which we're talking about the secrets and inner aspect of Torah. So where's the connection in preparing for Mashiach for the lower wisdoms, the wisdoms of the world being revealed? How does the Zohar put them together? Base continues then. The whole world, everything that's in the world, is all created, as we said, base reishes, bereishes, for Torah and for Yidden. That the Yidden should keep the Torah. That's what the world is created for. And everything that Hashem creates in His world is only created for Hashem's glory. From that we understand that every single created being, its real intention is that it's used for the service of Hashem. And so it is, if so, also regarding the wisdoms of the world. That the developments of Chokhmah, of worldly matters, the purpose of it is to use it for serving Hashem or for understanding the Torah of Hashem. Parentheses, square brackets. Since, however, not every mind is able to really contain or achieve this great level of using all the developments of worldly wisdom in the service of Hashem. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that this was the reason of the Rambam and the Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides, and those like them that occupy themselves in learning worldly wisdom because they were able to use it for the service of Hashem. But Alter Rebbe there is saying that it's something that's for the great luminaries, for great minds, for great servants of Hashem. Yechidei Skula, special individuals can reach that level. But somebody who's not at the level is able to harness and use and utilize those wisdoms for serving Hashem, so then on the contrary, he takes the Chokhmah Bina Das, the intellect of his nafshay, or the kiss of his godly soul, and he's putting it into, he's dirtying it with, rather than learning godly wisdom in Torah, he's learning worldly wisdom. Because not everybody knows how to elevate it and use it. Gimel, here the Rebbe puts in something that's something that's very, very powerful. Everything that Rebbe writes is powerful. I mean, it's not so much the style of a sikha, it's more like the style of a fabrei. Here we have to make a disclaimer, says the Rebbe. We have to forewarn, even though really it's self-understood. Everything that we've been talking about now, and especially where the Rebbe will continue the sikha is, we're going to talk about the great, the positive things that have been found in the developments in worldly wisdom. But all this has absolutely no connection to the question about learning in college or university or similar places. Where there, the prohibition against that is because of the danger also. not just because the prohibition of not utilizing your mind properly for Torah, where if a person's able to utilize those things for serving Hashem, then it's okay to learn other wisdom, the wisdom of the world. Going into the environment of college, universities is a totally different question, because the whole atmosphere there, the whole philosophy there in those places of learning, at least, and the Rabbi adds in brackets, in those institutions in our generations, that whole atmosphere is permeated with denial of Hashem's ongoing individual hashgacha, supervision of the world. Hashgacha pratis is basically denied in the atmosphere of college, university. The premise there in those institutions of learning is that there's nothing and no power that can mix into the way the world works based on its natural laws of nature. And that's an axiom that's assumed and taken on, that doesn't need to be even proven. And that's the basis of the whole study in these places of study. And doesn't even have to be mentioned, that's just assumed. And in many of the places of college, university, things that are heresy and beliefs that are idolatry and so on are studied. And we know, quotes the Rebbe in footnote 19, that Hashem commanded us not even to study about idolatry. Even if we're not going to believe in it, we just want to inquisitively study it. We're instructed, as part of our instruction, not to worship Avodah Zarah, foreign gods, idols. We're not even allowed to study it, just for inquisitive sake. And mostly, continues the Rebbe, there's no boundaries in terms of tznius, in terms of being busha and tznius, in terms of bashfulness, not how do you say busha and tznius translated? Modesty. The contrary, modesty is even frowned upon and laughed upon and treated cynically. And people that want to act in a modest, discreet way are looked down upon and laughed at. And on the contrary, anybody who's more open and without barriers is considered more elevated. As is well known, underlined well known, says the terrible situation in all of this, in the campuses, in the dormitories, in the places where they go and hang out, etc. And I don't want to speak too long about something shocking, and especially something so shocking. When people say it's not gonna affect me, I'm strong, I've buttressed myself, I'm not going to be affected by all this, it won't be a temptation for me. So we know there's a simple rule that even a complete tzaddik, in the last day of his 120th year here on earth, and at the beginning of the day, even before he goes to regular davening, in the morning prayers, there's a tefillah. We ask Hashem, don't bring me to a test. So why would somebody put themselves into a situation which is extremely challenging? We could speak a lot about this, says the Rebbe, but this is not the place to speak it. But the Rebbe did put it here into the Sikha. We're talking about wisdom of the world. So now let's get back to the point. Dalet, the Rebbe says, since the Zohar connects the development of the wisdom of the world with the fact that the world is going to ascend into the Mashiach's time in the 7,000th year, so we understand that the benefit from these chachmas, of these wisdoms in the service of Hashem, must express itself in something that represents a preparation for the advantage and the achievement that will happen when Mashiach will come. So from the main things that will be when Mashiach comes is, it says, the yiyud, the promise in the prophets, it says, V'niglek v'ed Hashem, the glory of Hashem will be revealed, V'ro kol basar yachdav, and all flesh will see together in unison, Ki pi Hashem diber, that it's the mouth of Hashem that speaks. In other words, that the revelation of godliness that will be in the time of Mashiach will be not just in a way that Mala ha'aretz deos Hashem, that the world is full with the knowledge of Hashem, but not necessarily accessible or visible to everybody. No, it's going to be in a way that all flesh will see the presence of Hashem. Even the physical flesh will see that Hashem's mouth is the one that speaks, the presence of Hashem. In other words, not just will it be a visible thing in the spiritual, intellectual eye, so to speak, intellectually and spiritually, nor even as the Mittel Rebbe speaks at length, it's going to be a physical sight with the physical eye. And more than that, it doesn't just say that it says all flesh will see. It doesn't say all fleshy eyes will see. Like we say by davening, may our eyes seize when you come back to Tzion when Mashiach comes. The pasuk says all flesh will see. So from that we can infer that not just does the eye, physical eye see, even the actual flesh, physical flesh, will be able to comprehend and perceive that it's Hashem that speaks. In other words, that its source is Hashem. That Hashem's presence will be palpable, visible. And this is the connection, therefore, between the development of the wisdoms in the world and the preparation for the ascent of the world in the 7,000th year when Mashiach comes. Why? Because the fact that we use the wisdom that develops in the world to serving Hashem and to understanding His Torah helps in the great gift that will be when Mashiach comes, that will be able to physically see things, godliness. So this wisdom is now helping us to be able to more palpably and visibly, physically see things that before we could only imagine, or not even imagine. Hey, the Rebbe continues. An example is, one of the powers embedded in nature already since the 6 days of creation. It was there, but people didn't know about it. And it was discovered and developed only in more recent years, says the Rebbe, is what allows for the voice of a person who's speaking in one particular place should be able to be heard in a very distant place till in the far reaches of the earth and even on the moon, through a telephone, or even more so through radio. And lately, the Rebbe is saying, this is also a person to also be able to be visible. A person, everything he's doing is able to be visible from one place to another place. Right? So you have radio, and the Rebbe doesn't mention the word television. We know that this was not, television was something that the Rebbe didn't want at all, didn't belong in a Jewish home. But so perhaps for that reason it doesn't, the words not mentioned here. But the Rebbe says there are means to be able to see a person and everything he's doing in the other side of the world. And this great achievement in the world, the opportunity to be able to hear everything that a person is speaking at the same time he's speaking it in all far-flung corners of the world, and to be able to see him. This gives us a palpable, a very real description of what we know in the Torah, that Hashem is ayin roya v'eizin shemas. There's an eye that sees and an ear that listens. And on the contrary, if even the ear down here below can hear things, and with even further technology, the eye can see things that's happening in the other part of the world, how much more so when we're talking about the supernal ear and the supernal eye? As we say every Wednesday, the verse in Tehillim that says, Hanoita oizen ala yishma, Hashem who makes the ear. You think he can't hear? Im yotzer ayin la yabed, the one who creates eyes, can he not see? So obviously there's no limitations when it comes to supernal, to Hashem's, so to speak, power of sight and ear. And everything a person does, even in the most hiddenmost of places, is at that moment exactly caught by the eye that hears and the ear that listens. And therefore, everything is written down and recorded in the book, And therefore, interesting, I'm not sure if this the Sikha was said, when the Sikha was said, there was so much recording was so in. I guess so. Today, of course, this Sikha said beginning in 1966, and then continued in 1976. At any rate, since this is such a visible example, right, of Ein Revez Shemas, so when a person now meditates and thinks that Hashem is standing over him and is watching him and is checking his insides, whether or not he's serving him properly, it's not just some kind of an abstract thought. Well, sometimes we have abstract thoughts, it doesn't really affect a person. But now this is something you can actually, it becomes much closer to our physical abilities. Wow. See and hear. We know that we can see and hear things, and therefore it more affects the midas in the heart. In other words, we appreciate more realistically the fact that everything's being heard and being seen, and therefore that will have an effect on our heart, which has an effect on the way we think, speak, and do. Vav. Even though everything in the world has been created for Torah and Yisrael, really everything can be used to serve Hashem. Nonetheless, we see that within the things that are used to serve Hashem, there are sometimes our sages identified certain things that are different, and they were never even intended for anything else but service of Hashem. For example, the Medrash says the world was not fitting to have gold. Gold was created only for the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah, but we use gold. That's a secondary use. Jewelry, currencies, that's secondary use. Really, it's all about service of Hashem. And the Rabbi points out here, the difference between these things that are singled out as being created solely for the purpose of serving Hashem, and the other things that are not pointed out in this manner is by all other things, by all aspects of creation. They're created indeed in order to serve for their main purpose. Beis Reishis, the world is created for two things, for Torah and for Yisrael. So we're meant to use it to serve Hashem. However, it can also be that the function of their use is when they're used for worldly things, for permissible things, which are later used, from which you derive a benefit in serving Hashem. So I'll just give you an example. Steel. So from steel, you can make a pot. And that pot, you can cook a soup. And that soup gives energy. And we take the energy and learn Torah. For example. When it comes to gold, however, the Torah says explicitly, the world really wasn't going to get gold. The world's not worthy to get such a fine substance. And therefore, that's not the real use of gold. When gold is used for money, and that money is taken and we serve Hashem with it, that's actually a descent for the main purpose of gold. The whole reason that gold is created and given to this world is it should be used in the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. However, because Hashem gives free choice, so there's always the contra, and that is it can be used for other things also. So he let it to be used in the world, also not for things of Mishkan and Mikdash. And it can be used for negativity, and it can be used as a vehicle for positivity, like all other things in the world. But really, gold, its real intended purpose is not to be a vehicle to lead to something that can be used for serving Hashem, is actually to be part of Hashem's service in the Mishkan. And similarly, regarding to what we're talking about here, the Zohar connects the development of wisdom down here below with the revelation of the wisdom from above, of the Pnimius HaTorah, and with the fact that this leads to the ascent in the 7th year. So that shows that it's not just that these things, these inventions and developments come to the world now, and we can also use them, like everything in the world, for serving Hashem, but no. Their whole intention in coming to the world, their whole intention in the development is to be a preparation to ascend to the time of Mashiach. Of course, it can be used for other things also, just like gold. Hashem gives bechira, gives choice, so it can be used for other things. But what is its real intention? Just like gold, says the Rebbe. The Zohar is connected the development of the inventions from 1739, on, with the fact that we're preparing the world for Mashiach. And that is the intention of that great revolution and outpouring of developments in the scientific and industrial world. All those discoveries are intended to prepare the world for Mashiach. They can be used also for other things, because Hashem gives free choice, just like gold, used for all kinds of things, jewelry, to back currency, and so on. But its real intention is to the base of English. That's what it comes to the world for. In other words, dos haste. With the fact that, from the fact that you can get a benefit in Avodas Hashem that we describe, you can see radio and you can hear radio, and you see that you can see things from one part of the world to the other. That can help you serve Hashem, because now you can understand how Hashem has an eye that sees and an ear that listens. No, not just that. That's like everything in the world. I was saying, from the fact that the Zohar connects these discoveries with the coming of Mashiach, it means that the real intention of this development is when those actual developments in science are used for Torah mitzvahs. That's what they're for. More than that. So the Zohar is connecting with Pnimiyus HaTorah. So we need to say that when the main intention for the development of these aspects in science and technology is so there should be a revelation of the supernal wisdom that's coming down, and can be also backed up and supported by the wisdom that's coming from below. Zion, as explained earlier, one of the big advantages of Mashiach coming, one of the big new things that will be in the world is that the world will be full of the knowledge of Hashem, just like the seabed is covered by water. And this will also be in a way that the flesh itself will see. So now we have something similar in the development of worldly wisdoms, which is what? We have the development of the wisdom of the world and inventions helps spread the revelation of the Pnimiyus HaTorah, which is a preparation to the Torah of Mashiach. So we have the well springs from below facilitating the well springs from above. What's the example for that? When you use a radio to spread Pnimiyus HaTorah. So what happens? The Pnimiyus HaTorah, the inside of Torah, the deeper aspect of Torah, is being heard physically in all parts of the world. So you have the well springs from above, Pnimiyus HaTorah, Chassidus, being facilitated and spread forth by the well springs from below. And more than that, the words of Chassidus that are spoken on the radio permeate the entire world. Even in a place where there's no transmitter, where there's no, is it called a radio transmitter? No, where there's no transistor, where there's no radio to receive those radio waves and broadcast broadcast them. Radio waves are all over. As we know, that the voice and the radio waves are all over in all the world. Not just in potential, but they're actually there. Because the radio itself its function is to take those radio waves that are there and to change them, transform them again to the voice that was the way it sounded when they were transmitted by the radio waves. It doesn't create a new voice. So it means that even if you don't have a radio, if nobody's listening, the waves are there all over. What waves are they? The knowledge of Hashem. So you have the developments from below that are facilitating and spreading that the world is full of the knowledge of Hashem. And that's what it's intended for. They were saying that it's intended for that. And in the meantime, the world also gets to benefit from the use of technology, because there's bechira, there's free choice, so it can't be forced that it's only for things of Kedusha. You understand what we're saying here? We're saying that from the fact that the Zohar connects it to it means that just like Zov, just like the Medrash tells us, the world really only gets gold for use of the Beis Hamikdash. The other uses are secondary. That I'm saying that these developments that come in the 600th year onwards, they're really all about part of the process of preparing the world for Mashiach. That's their intended mission. And the best way, to do that would be to use those things to actually spread forth the word of Hashem, like Tanya on radio. Ches. Now the Rebbe goes another step. This thing that we're saying, that we're using the nations, the wisdom of the world for a second thing, to be used for Torah mitzvahs, but that still doesn't show how the actual wisdom itself is an expression of Kedusha. How it's connected to Kedusha. It's using something, so to speak, a parva, something worldly, using it as a catalyst, using it as a carrier for Kedusha, yeah. But really, the true binding, the true unity between what the Zohar says, the well springs of above, well springs from below, so the worldly wisdom with Torah is that in the worldly wisdom that's been developed, you see and perceive things of Pnimis HaTorah. They themselves give you the message of Pnimis HaTorah. And the Rebbe says, Chara 31, to Lahore, to point out that the Zohar continues on this theme, and it says, in that time, when the well springs will be open, it'll be revealed to everybody. As it says, Ki Oz in Safania, there's a prophecy, then I will turn to all the nations with a clear language, and they'll all come to the understanding of Hashem. So in other words, from the actual, the Rebbe is supporting what the Rebbe is saying here, that from the actual wisdom, you see in the wisdom itself the presence of Hashem. Well, how is that? Because one of the basic ways we see this in a visible way, Pnimis HaTorah, what does it come? Pnimis HaTorah comes to reveal the oneness of Hashem. The oneness of Hashem in the world. That notwithstanding the fact that there's a multitude of created beings, all of those creations with all the multitudes that they represent, they are not at all a contradiction to the oneness of Hashem. Because on the contrary, the very many and multitudes of levels that come forth comes particularly because of Hashem's perfect oneness. As explained in various places in Chassidus, that because of the oneness of Hashem and his unlimitedness, from him can come also varied levels and multitudes of different individual creations. When something is limited, it's limited to giving forth exactly what it is. But Hashem, in his oneness, is totally unlimited. Therefore, he can give forth, and from him comes diversity. So the diversity of the world is not at all a contradiction to the oneness of Hashem. And Chassidus explains to us and guides us to be able to see in a world that looks fragmented, to see the oneness of Hashem. But since the oneness, the true existence of the world is the oneness of Hashem, the simple Achdus Apshuta, the simple oneness of Hashem, therefore this unity, this oneness also expresses itself in the actual mitzias, in the actual existence of the world. That in the world itself you see the Achdus, you see the oneness. And this concept, the way the oneness of Hashem is in the world, because in its core, really, it's oneness because it's coming from Hashem, who's one. This becomes more and more revealed with the development of the worldly wisdoms. It used to be thought that every one of the physical nature laws, every one of the elements, is its own individual, separate power, and in the chaymer, in the matter of every existing being, there are other elements that make it up. Every piece of existence is made up of various elements. And however, as science develops, the worldly wisdom develops, more and more we come to the recognition that this ribui, this multitude and fragmentation, and the fact that it's developed into many elements, you could subdivide it into many elements, that's only the external aspect of creation. However, when we get to the depth of the matter, we really limit it and limit it and limit it till the revelation, till the understanding that the point of existence of matter, the point of existence of the world, is really the combination, the joining of two forces, quantity and quality. The matter that has energy. And that is really, now, so it's really simplified. Science has come to the realization that that's really simplified. It's energy and matter. And this oneness, of course, comes, true oneness is only in Elikus. So when you come in creation and you see the unity in the entire creation, how it's broken down, it comes down to two simple things, energy and matter, and the combination of them. So this gives you an inkling, and this starts to express the oneness of Hashem, that everything starts from one. The Rebbe quotes here in the footnote 36 in the Ibn Ezra, in his relation to the Torah, he says, why does the Torah start with a base? To tell you that Hashem is one. Created beings are two, which is their matter and their form and matter. At any rate, so it seems the Rebbe is saying here that there's energy and matter combined. That's at the crux, excuse me if I don't understand science too much, but I think energy and matter, I think, are the words that can be used there, and they're combined. They come from the oneness of Hashem. So I think the Rebbe brings in the Ibn Ezra. So that one is Hashem, but everything in creation, with all the differences and huge differences between all aspects of creation, when it boils down to it, it's really just two simple things. It's really one combined energy and matter that is at the crux, at the innermost aspect of all creation, which helps us, which actually expresses the oneness of Hashem. Everything is just godliness. And this is the connection between the development of the worldly wisdom with the revelation of Lahavdil, to separate the Pnimius HaTorah, the inner aspects of Torah. Because it also becomes part of the process of preparing the world to go up in the 7,000th year, Mashiach. In other words, says the Rebbe, the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah automatically brings also the development of the nations, of the worldly wisdom. Automatically, says the Rebbe in footnote 38, there's a mashal that the Rebbe gives that when the king makes a feast for his close people, there are leftovers. It produces leftovers that go to the servants and so on. And then there are the bones that are thrown under the table, go to the dogs. So in other words, what the Rebbe seems to be saying here is that the revelation of the great secrets of Torah produces automatically residual lower levels of Chachma, which represented by the well springs opening up from below, represented by the worldly wisdom. But why does there need to also be worldly wisdom? Because through them, so you have developed something similar to what happens when Mashiach comes, because they help to to reveal the oneness of Hashem in the world. And in some way, at least a me'ain, at least there's a touch now of the flesh actually being able to see Hashem. In other words, that world itself is expressing the oneness of Hashem. You see the achdus of Hashem in the world itself. And interesting, the Rebbe also says in Orah 37 that in the parts of the Rambam, the end of the Rambam, the laws of Mashiach, the parts of the Rambam that are taken out by the censor, the Rebbe says that the Rambam says even the other religions, Yeshu and Ishmaeli, they're just to prepare the world for Mashiach. Right? When Mashiach comes, now everybody knows about Mashiach because of the dissemination of the religion that speaks about the Messiah, and so on and so forth. So the Rebbe is saying that this is a further preparation. We see that everything that happens in the world is a preparation for Mashiach. The Zohar connects the two, the higher wisdom, lower wisdom. This higher wisdom is in order to prepare the world for Mashiach, and this gives birth also to a lower wisdom, which is expressing, and that's whole purpose is to express the oneness of Hashem and to give the flesh, to give the world itself an opportunity to see behind the veneer of what the world looks like, and to get to the crux of the matter, that it all expresses Achdus Hashem, because it's really just energy and matter that's behind everything. And then we really get it. You really get it, that in truth, this oneness, this unity that you see throughout creation is not different than the oneness of Hashem. It's just an expression of the oneness of Hashem, which becomes revealed, that is revealed in Pnei Misatera. And through that becomes what the Zohar says, the world is repaired, prepared to go up in the 7,000th year, may it be speedily in our days. Amen.